Gervonta Tank Davis has never been one to sugarcoat his opinions, and when the topic of Jake Paul came up, he made it absolutely clear what he thought. In his view, Jake is not an awkward fighter in the way seasoned professionals recognize awkwardness. For Davis, awkward fighters are unique and unpredictable, presenting real challenges that demand skill to figure out. Jake Paul, in his eyes, is simply a dumb fighter. Davis compared him to someone who just walks into a gym for the first time, picks up some basics, and after a short while begins to believe he has everything figured out. That, Davis insisted, is the way Paul fights, without real foundation, without true awkwardness, and without the instincts that define an authentic boxer. He went as far as to say that in this sport, it's either you're trying to take me out or I'm trying to take you out, and Jake doesn't truly understand that. Instead, Davis believes Paul approaches boxing as a business tactic, one built on making money rather than genuine fighting ability. At a press conference, Davis raised the tension by threatening Paul directly, saying he intended to finish the fight in brutal fashion, knock him out without hesitation, and walk away with the payday. Davis projected confidence in his power, speed, and determination, and he wanted the world to know that this fight was more about domination than showmanship from his perspective. On the other hand, promoter Eddie Hearn did not hide his criticism. Hearn has seen the rise of crossover events and exhibitions in recent years, and while he understands their marketability, he made clear distinctions between real boxing and what he labeled entertainment spectacles. To Hearn, Davis versus Paul falls firmly into the latter category. He laughed off the notion of the fight as a genuine sporting contest, instead calling it a spectacle designed solely for attention. In his assessment, it wasn't about skill, talent, or legacy. It was about creating headlines, selling pay-per-views, and capitalizing on fan curiosity. Hearn compared it to other spectacles, like Jake Paul's rumored fight with Mike Tyson, events that he admitted he personally disliked but acknowledged could generate massive numbers. For him, Davis versus Paul is a lightweight versus a cruiserweight, an absurd mismatch that people may tune into out of intrigue rather than sporting merit. Though he wanted no part in promoting or endorsing such an event, he admitted that regardless of his personal feelings, it would likely do huge business. Meanwhile, Ariel Helwani offered a different take. He pointed out a double standard between MMA and boxing fans. In MMA, unconventional or freak show fights often receive acceptance, even celebration. Fans there embrace the spectacle with the understanding that it is entertainment. Helwani argued that when boxing faces a similar situation, critics pile on, dismissing the events as degrading to the sport. He noted that the Davis versus Paul matchup should not be judged by the same standards as title fights or sanctioned championship bouts. Instead, it should be seen as a one-off entertainment show. According to him, if MMA audiences can enjoy such spectacles, then boxing audiences should be able to approach this fight in the same spirit. For Helwani, the backlash wasn't entirely fair because fans already accept spectacle elsewhere. Chael Sonnen, however, was far more critical. Sonnen has long been outspoken about the Paul brothers and their place in combat sports. He dismissed Jake Paul's boxing ability, arguing that the brothers are not respected for real skill, but for their fame, money, and marketing. Sonnen said Jake has repeatedly relied on his financial power and massive platform to secure big-name fights, often against opponents past their prime or at a disadvantage. He characterized Jake's career as built on manipulating circumstances rather than proving himself against genuine competition. Sonnen argued that Davis versus Paul was not about fairness or competitive spirit, but simply another example of money-driven matchmaking. His critique reflected the opinions of many who view the fight as a circus designed to generate publicity rather than advance boxing as a sport. Much of the conversation has centered on the size difference between the two fighters. Davis is a natural lightweight, fighting around 135 pounds. Jake Paul, on the other hand, has competed closer to cruiserweight, walking around 190 to 200 pounds. That massive gap has sparked speculation, with some analysts even suggesting the fight could be predetermined. If Jake wins, he gains credibility by defeating a champion-level boxer, regardless of weight. If Davis wins, critics can dismiss it as irrelevant due to the mismatch. This lopsided situation has led some to wonder whether the fight might already be scripted to favor Paul's career trajectory. Ryan Garcia weighed in with his own perspective. He compared the event to controversial matchups in the past, such as Mike Tyson's exhibition fights late in his career. Garcia admitted the public never truly asked for Davis versus Paul, but the business of boxing often forces such spectacles forward. He stressed that Davis is far smaller than Paul, making the fight inherently unfair. Still, Garcia believed that despite the discomfort many fans felt, they would eventually have to accept the event because of the financial motivations driving it. To him, the hype machine ensures that these fights happen, whether or not they make sporting sense. Jake Paul himself played into the build-up by pulling one of his signature stunts. He released a video where he destroyed a cake shaped like Davis, mocking him and fueling the rivalry narrative. Paul has long been a master of spectacle, and this was no different. The act was designed to humiliate his opponent while generating buzz online, and it succeeded in getting headlines and attention. This kind of promotional theater has always been central to Paul's strategy. He thrives as much on mind games and publicity as he does inside the ring. From a technical perspective, analysts debated whether Davis's punches would even register against Paul's larger frame. Davis is known for his knockout power, but power often diminishes when moving up multiple weight classes. Many wondered if his shots would have the same effect on someone as big as Jake Paul. At the same time, Paul's size advantage meant that if he landed clean, the impact on Davis could be devastating. The intrigue of the fight rested on this clash of skill versus size. Observers admitted that while Davis has far superior footwork, defense, and speed, the physical disparity could neutralize his usual advantages. Some analysts pointed out that Davis's defense could make Paul look foolish. If Davis moved his feet, dodged shots, and forced Paul to miss, the fight might become an exhibition of technical skill against raw size. Comparing it to basketball, they described how a shorter, quicker player can easily outmaneuver a taller opponent with rapid first steps. This could become the dynamic of the fight, Davis making Paul swing at air while landing sharp counters. Others, however, stressed that Paul would try to use his size aggressively, mauling, clinching, and leaning on Davis to wear him down. That clash of approaches would define the bout. Attention also turned to the undercard. Analysts expressed hope that the supporting fights would be stronger than recent examples, such as the underwhelming Canelo Alvarez vs. Terence Crawford card. Many felt the spectacle of Davis vs. Paul needed strong backing bouts to keep fans engaged throughout the night. Terence Crawford himself dismissed the fight outright. Crawford, one of the most respected pound-for-pound fighters, openly questioned how promoters could sanction a match between someone weighing around 195 pounds and someone from 135 pounds. To him, it was not a real fight, but more of an exhibition, a business move designed for money rather than competition. He even suggested the event could be scripted, pointing out that neither fighter would want to take an actual loss. Crawford compared it to Jake Paul's exhibition with Mike Tyson, which was heavily marketed but ultimately disappointing in the ring. His reaction highlighted the skepticism among professionals who see these events as undermining boxing's legitimacy. Even among fans, rumors began to swirl. A particularly controversial claim emerged suggesting Davis might be offered as much as $200 million to take a dive against Jake Paul. According to this speculation, Davis could intentionally lose the fight in exchange for the massive payday. For many, this rumor was disturbing, as it suggested the event might not be about competition at all, but pure business. Some argued that if true, it would damage the credibility of boxing and reinforce the perception that such fights are staged entertainment. Others counted that given it was an exhibition and would not go on Davis's record, the financial temptation might outweigh concerns about legacy. Fans debated whether they themselves would take such an offer, questioning what they would do for $200 million in a fight that didn't even count officially. Despite the speculation, the reality remains that Davis is significantly smaller than Paul. Analysts worried that his punches might not carry enough impact to hurt Paul, while Paul's heavier shots could potentially end the fight if they landed. Yet there was also intrigue about how Davis might adapt. Could his footwork, defense, and counterpunching overcome the weight disadvantage? Would Paul's lack of refined skill leave openings that Davis could exploit? The uncertainty fueled interest. As the debate raged, commentators circled back to the broader issue of legacy. Some argued that by taking fights like this, Davis risks diminishing his reputation. Instead of chasing belts, rivalries, and challenges within his division, he appears more focused on money. Critics said this would hinder his place among the all-time greats, no matter his talent. On the other hand, supporters counted that knocking out Jake Paul in dramatic fashion would only enhance his mainstream appeal, regardless of how purists judged the matchup. For fans, the chance to see Davis flatten Paul might be more satisfying than another sanctioned title defense. Ultimately, the fight was framed as skill versus size, spectacle versus sport, money versus legacy. From Davis's blunt dismissal of Paul as a dumb fighter, to Hearn's critique of the event as a freak show, to Helwani's defense of its entertainment value, the voices surrounding the matchup painted a complex picture. Sonnen condemned Paul's reliance on fame. Garcia highlighted the unfairness of the weight gap. Crawford refused to take it seriously, and rumors of a fixed outcome added further controversy. Meanwhile, Paul continued to promote with antics, confident that the spectacle itself would sell. In the end, whether fans see Davis versus Paul as a disgrace or as must-see entertainment, the fight symbolizes the tension in modern boxing. Traditionalists worry about the sport being overshadowed by spectacle, while promoters and fans recognize the undeniable business power of such events. Some view it as a dangerous mismatch, others as a circus worth watching, and still others as a sign of boxing's ongoing struggle to balance legitimacy with profitability. The fight has become more than just Davis against Paul. It is a debate about what boxing is, what it should be, and how far it can stretch before it breaks.